Hey, 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 what is going on, people? Welcome to The Word with me, Keenan, and of course, Kiki B. Hello, Kiki.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm super excited to have another lady on here with another badass book to talk about.
I know, right? I love having the ladies. Like my Hey Keenan the other day, I love having the ladies. So this is going to be a good show. Everybody listen, welcome to The Word with Keenan and Kiki B. The Word is where you come to get your dose of Sales 411 in a non-boring, non-old school, blue blazer button-down way. We break it down. We get you real information with excitement and energy and enthusiasm, and our shit is real. So welcome to The Word. And speaking of real, we have a real guest today. We have Babette Ten Haken. And my girl asked a great question. Do you mean business? And we're going to talk about her great book, Do You Mean Business? We're talking about cross-functional collaboration. We're going to talk about talking to tech people, because in this tech world, it is more and more important. So with that, let's welcome BNTH, Babette Ten Haken. What's up, sister?
Hey, I'm so thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to doing a sales jolt with you, so thank you.
Oh,
collaborate with you.
We got it. We are super, super happy to have you, excited to have you. Listen, you guys, I've been following Babette for a while, and she's a fun lady. She's enthusiastic. But rather than me tell you all that, I'll let you experience it. I just threw all my papers on the floor. So, Babette, give our audience, while I bend down to pick up my papers, the 2-minute spiel. Like, why did you deserve to be on The Word? Tell us about your book. Give us the 411 on you.
Oh, my goodness. I focus on customer success for customer retention. You know, so much of sales education is about getting that first sale. But I'll tell you something, you have to retain your customers these days. And I live in the technical sector. I'm a technical person by training. I am a scientist by training. So I'm exactly about, you know, I'm a STEM person, you know, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. All those courses that most salespeople cringe about, you know, that they avoided or didn't do too well in high school or college. So,
unfortunately, most women. There are not a lot of women in STEM. And the higher you go up, like PhDs, you can count them on a single hand.
Yeah, yeah. And so, you know, I've always focused on we all have defining moments. And so mine came when I was a corporate newbie in the pharmaceutical industry many years ago, and I was put on this cross-functional new product development team, and I was with some of the senior leaders of the company, so I was like, you know, what am I doing here? But I found soon enough that I had been asked to be part of that team. First of all, I was in clinical research, but also because I could do, and still can, something that not a lot of people can do. I can facilitate across the interface between sales and engineering. So I do simultaneous translation across that interface. And I'm really passionate and committed about this. It's the key to business development, sales success, but most importantly, economic growth and recovery. And Lord knows we're experiencing a lot of that stuff going on. And what I'm really supercharged about is this little thing that's going on now called the Industrial Internet of Things. I tend to orbit around the manufacturing, IT, and engineering sectors. And it's impacting everything that we do. We hear buzzwords in sales about being data-driven and, you know, making data decisions and all that other stuff, but what does it really mean? Because what I'm seeing on my end is my clients and, you know, they're drowning in data. And so they don't know how to analyze it, they don't know how to interpret it, and that really puts a bigger emphasis on us as salespeople to really kind of get on over to that STEM side and become comfortable and conversant selling, working with technical people.
All right, so all right, I think you're hitting in some really interesting spaces, and there's a lot of places we can go with this, and we've only got, you know, technically 42 minutes. I always run over, but so tell me, if someone's listening right now and they're thinking, why do I need to go any further in this podcast? What are they going to walk away from What are people going to learn, and why do they not want to hit the pause or stop?
Okay. Let me just do this thing. I'm pulling this thing up, but just wanted to make sure. I want you to understand there's going to be three things. First of all, you're going to think smarter. You're not stupid. You're going to think smarter. You're going to think bigger, and you're going to think like a sales scientist, okay, as a result of coming up of our conversation.
Okay, so let's start with the sales scientist. What is a sales scientist, and why do I need to think like one?
A sales scientist is pretty important because the most important, we're all taught to listen, right? But the thing is, we have to really understand three key tenets. Data is really important, and it's not necessarily the same type of data that's used in your sales materials or your infographics. The type of data that technical people are used to dealing with tends to be a little bit more scientific than sales and marketing data. So you have to understand the differences. The other thing is word choices are really important too. Data form the basis of product design and process specifications. So think about yourself as a sales professional. How many times are you sitting there having a conversation with a prospective customer or current customer, and you're using things like probably, usually, actually, occasionally, certainly, mostly? I mean, there is no approximately in science and technology. And the other thing, third thing, is one word can have different meanings. When you're agreeing with somebody and you're saying exactly, a scientist is sitting there going, oh, they want exactly that. When you use precisely, which is more exact than exactly, somebody's thinking, how can I design against that word? So you have to kind of build some antenna on your head and really, as you're being a data scientist, observe the scenario, even if it's a virtual scenario, a conversation that we're having today, and really get a handle on what are the implications of the conversation, and don't be afraid to sit back and listen.
Okay, so the premise we're making here with this first one, when you call it a sales scientist, comes around the vernacular and how you engage with technical people.
Absolutely.
One, why do I have to even, can't I just avoid technical people? I use my sales engineer to do that. And two, if not, how do I know I have that type of audience and when I should shift my vernacular? Start with the first question.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a lot about sales engineers and how we misuse them, quite honestly, because most of us in sales take the engineer off the shelf right before the demo, or else we have the sales cycle and we leave the close of the sale down to the key demo. So here we are, and then all of a sudden we turn something over to the engineer who has not been part of the sales cycle at all. This may be the first time that they're on stage. And so they're technical. They're going to get into minutia. They're going to end up talking to their engineer. And my friend, you have just lost control of that sale. That type of technology, that type of methodology and process for sales is used pretty pervasively, and it doesn't work most of the time. How many sales have gone south during the demo because you weren't proactive and anticipatory of all the people that were going to be in on that demo, and you didn't understand what they were talking about? And you could have if you bring your sales engineer in from the get-go.
Okay, so all right, so it's interesting. We're using sales engineers wrong. So I'm gonna kind of, yeah. So I'm gonna take us back to that though. Why is it important to learn to sell to the technical person? Why can't I just avoid them? Or why is it important to learn that? Why is that important?
It's important if you want to. Salespeople leave a lot of commission dollars on the table because they're just plain straight up intimidated to sell to technical decision makers. And these are really, really good sellers. But if you are into complex selling, and even if you're not, even if you're, let's say, doing internet market research, but if you are selling capital equipment, software, and who isn't these days, you cannot avoid selling to these people, and they make the best customers They offer the greatest potential for customer success. You can have the biggest impact on your organizations because you are a sales scientist. You're an expert at business. They're an expert at technology. So they're really longing to hear what you have to say to them, but you're just too intimidated to even open up that conversation.
So how do I know what I'm sitting across from a quote unquote a technical person? Because my feeling is this: just because they have the title doesn't necessarily mean they're a technical buyer, right? There are times, and you could have someone who's in marketing, or you could have somebody who's in finance who operates or acts as a technical buyer, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just their personality, versus someone who is in a IT role, but they're going to act or buy like a emote responsive or a non-technical buyer. What are the signs? What do I need to look for to know who I'm talking to and when to change it up?
That's a great question.
I love good questions.
That's a great question. You can really, I want everybody who's watching and listening today to think about composition, cadence, and tempo. Because communication dysfunction with anybody in your organization, because if you can sell to technical decision makers, you can sell to anybody. Dysfunction starts when you're doing a salsa and I'm doing the foxtrot. It's just
those are some old school dances. You got to come up with some new school stuff, like maybe the nay and
yeah.
the stanky leg. You know what I'm saying? Or the Dougie and the stanky leg. I mean, something. You cannot say the fox. I mean, talking about communication, you're on the word, girl. You cannot drop the...
But that's exactly why I use the foxtrot, because a foxtrot is really a precise dance.
Okay. And
technical professionals, and the nay is all over the place. And so, well, it is. Okay, it's got a lot of variability, okay, and that's precisely the dichotomy, because technical professionals are very precise, very logical, think Spock, very precise, very logical, and so they're using they're using the scientific method to validate what you're saying. I mean, a lot of them were trained as scientists and engineers. They may have a postgraduate degree in business, but the way they're taught to see the universe and perceive problems is using the scientific method. And that means they form hypotheses about stuff, and then they want to validate the conclusions, including the data and whatever it is you're throwing at them, and then they're going to ask more questions. They're going to refine, control, and ask more questions. And the big thing is a salesperson, and so you can always tell who is technically oriented, which is the finance person, which is the engineering person, which is the manufacturing person, which is the operations person. And if you haven't done your homework and don't know what the backgrounds of these individuals are prior to having your conversation, shame on you, okay? But that's how they see the world. That's their lens. Now, business, sales, marketing, public relations are more subjective. They're more qualitative. They have more fuzzy endpoints. And so, in essence, there's a predisposition to play us versus them between the technical people and the sales and the business people. I mean, everybody's got baggage and bias about that. And so your role as a salesperson of worth is to create enough disruption, and the disruption, quite honestly, is cadence, composition, and tempo. So you're both doing the nay by the time you get through with your conference call, or by the time you get through with your in-person meeting, because people do business with people they understand first. You can't trust somebody you don't understand.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. So, all right. So here I recognize, all right, snap, I'm talking to this technical buyer, right? Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that I notice that technical buyers do that frustrates a lot of salespeople is technical buyers have a tendency to want to drill right into feature and function.
Yep.
And sometimes they'll drill into feature and function that is completely disconnected from the actual overall business problems or business challenges, and they take you down rat holes, right? Mm-hmm. How does a salesperson address that? How do they manage this idea that says, okay, I need to be able to speak their language, but I got to make sure they're connected with the overall business objectives here, so I'm not talking about this tiny little technical feature that has really no bearing on why we're talking about buying this solution in the first place.
Snap. My turn to snap you, too. That's exactly why you are a sales scientist, because you're proactive and anticipatory. The biggest service that you can create in the environment of selling to technical professionals to save them from themselves, because their fatal flaw is to go down the rabbit hole on features and benefits and start verbally fencing. And if you have inappropriately brought your sales engineer for that technical conversation, they're going to take you further down the rabbit hole. And I'll give you a great example. I was at a medical conference in San Francisco, okay, and these are the people that make the big, humongous, complicated medical machinery and software in areas of the hospital that we all don't ever want to be in, okay? So I worked the floor, and I was with a lot of technical colleagues, and they're like, we love to watch Babette work the floor. But the thing is, I walked up because I was talking business instead of technology, but I walked up to one of these manufacturers, and they're a very famous manufacturer. And I had a highly technical colleague with me. And I asked some general questions, and then my technical colleague asked a highly technical question. What do you think the sales guys did? Their eyes got as big as saucers. You know, they kind of assumed the fetal position, and they said, we got to get our engineer.
Uh-huh.
If they had been able to ask questions like, how does what you're asking relate to your clinical outcome that you're trying to achieve, and possibly the overall goals of your department and federal funding?
Yeah. So what you've just described there is a quintessential element of the challenger sale, and that's take control, right? So by asking that question, you're taking control of the situation and not allowing it to go down the rabbit hole by saying, oh, okay, you asked about this. Tell me a little bit more about why that question is important to you, and what are you looking for in understanding this technology or feature? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And I think as a salesperson of worth, you have every right to say, that's a really interesting conversation about the features. We can park it, put it on your proverbial virtual parking lot. However, we want to create as robust, nimble, and flexible a solution as possible for you without getting into the specifics, technical design specifics. Because, I mean, you have to remember, I mean, these meetings sometimes, they just degenerate into everybody strutting around like with peacocks with their, tail spread, and everybody's trying to show off how much they know, so they're slinging the lingo, and they're talking about features. You are in charge. If you're not intimidated, you can push back. You can take control of the conversation because you've got things you need to accomplish. And the bigger the picture you can ask as far as the questions are concerned, then you're talking like the CEO. And that person is the ultimate decision maker, not the buyer.
Yes. All right, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff. Everybody, listen, we are talking with Babette Ten Haken, author of Do You Mean Business? We're talking about technical people and salespeople learning to work together, or more importantly, salespeople learning to be able to talk to technical buyers and talk cross-functionally to increase your ability to make a sale and drive business. So everybody, all right, so with that said, Babette, I think a lot of what you're saying is super important, but I think a lot of organizations and people it goes in one ear and out the other.
Right.
Tell me a little bit why more people aren't doing this, and give us some more examples of ways they can begin to get better at this right away, right? So they aren't intimidated. Let's bring the intimidation factor down.
I wrote a book about this, by the way, folks. Peeps, it's got like 16 collaboration hacks to get you non-intimidated. So, because this is not a new issue. I think one of the biggest things is that people like to take shortcuts. And I think a problem is that they misuse the breadth and depth of their sales enablement program. A lot of times marketing or sales enablement programs are not necessarily current and up to date. I mean, let's face it, the Internet of Things changes by the nanosecond. So what works, and you find a one-size-fits-all piece of information. Haven't we all done this at some point in our career? Except it's not relevant. Or else you end up presenting information in an infographic or some marketing communication piece. And what happens when somebody says, what are your data resources? How many of them did you utilize to arrive at this statistic? Because for salespeople, we think that if we have a number and a percentage points after it, it's like the tablets from Mount Sinai. You know, we are not comfortable enough with data, and technical people work with data every day. There's always something to refute whatever your sales materials are kind of giving. So the thing is, do your own homework, read your own stuff, and stop using a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to you've got this one article and it's worked a couple times to get a meeting. Personally, find a Yoda in your organization. Find a technical Yoda in your organization and sit at their feet. That's what I did way back when. I never leave home without my Yoda or instant access to my Yoda. Because you have to anticipate that if you're really being effective, technical decision makers are going to ask you killer questions. And these are the ones that as salespeople, we always hope, oh my God, I hope they don't start asking killer questions. But that's their method of engaging, that's their method of validating, and they don't cut anybody any slack, even their own colleagues, because they want to make sure that they haven't overlooked anything. I mean, think The Martian, okay? Think the movie The Martian. I was getting excited there, you know? But if they were using approximate values,
yeah, they don't get anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly it. And in fact, the best sign that you're accomplishing and engaging your customers is when they start asking questions. That's what you really want them to do. And yet, as salespeople, what do? The minute they start asking that, we want to crawl under the table and assume the fetal position because we're challenged and intimidated. But that's my goal for you. I mean, that is my goal for anybody on this call.
You have a cool ebook out called "Selling to Skeptical Decision Makers." There it is, and I love a phrase in here, and it's sort of a little bit of what you just talked about, but I'd like to go a little further. Buyer skepticism is fueled by subjective factors impacting your brand and image. So talk a little bit about that idea. Buyer skepticism is fueled by subjective factors impacting your brand and image.
You know, it's kind of interesting about that. What page is that on, by the way? I got my own.
5.
5, okay. I said that? I'm just kidding. You know, technical decision makers and buyers buy stuff. They're all consumers of stuff, you know? And so there are some subjective biases. I mean, they don't take off their consumer hat when they walk into the workplace, or they're dealing with a buying decision that is, you know, within the context of their work. And so what makes you a great sales scientist is if you can tap into that common denominator that runs across the fact that they have to make a decision to buy. What I don't want for everybody listening to this call to do is for you to marginalize yourself and eliminate yourself from that conversation. So how can you, at least mentally, put yourself in a conversation that is as technical as that, you know, 90-inch television set that the guy at the Big Back Store taught your husband into making, and bring that into your sales conversations with the buying committee, because they're consumers. They've got that emotional and that kind of subjective aspect, and yet as buyers, they're basically taught they're supposed to beat you down on price. And so what you want to do is disrupt that pattern and tap into some of that subliminal subjective stuff.
Okay.
Because
keep going.
Yeah, take them across their technical skepticism and tap into some of their just the fact that we're all buyers.
Okay, so let's see if we can create some examples for folks, right? Because I'm a visual person, and generally speaking, I'm probably more responsive. Although I don't know, Keith could probably tell you I'm probably more technical buyer than I think I realize sometimes. But or at least I can play on both sides of the fence. So using your example of the 80-foot screen, okay, a subjective factor would be it's got a super clear screen. It's a big television. It's thin. All of that is subjective, right?
That's technical.
Okay, wait, let's have some fun with I say
Oh,
no,
okay.
it's subjective, right? Using your argument from what I just learned from you, saying it's a clear screen or super clear in detail is subjective. Telling you it's 1080p or telling you it's 4K, 2 million pixels per second, that's precise.
Correct.
Telling you it's a big screen is subjective. Telling you it's 96 inches from left corner to right corner, that's precise, right? So isn't that what you're talking about here? Being able to not just describe what you have, but be very technical and specific in describing it so that that technical buyer can grasp it in their terms.
And then saying, because what happens, I mean, eventually at that point, both the salespeople and your husband turn their gaze towards the screen, and the salesperson goes, imagine having that sitting on your wall and watching the Green Bay Packers from any point in your kitchen, right? Vision. And that's where I think a lot of salespeople drop that ball. It's Mr. Buyer, as a result of having this 90-inch crystal clear, a bazillion pixel screen, your CEO is going to be able to provide greater clarity when they are selling your products and services to their customers. So it's connecting those dots as to how you intend to support that organization after the sale to ensure their success so that you can keep them as customers. And I think so many salespeople go down the rabbit hole because of getting tripped up on technical specifications, because what's the life cycle of what you're selling? I mean, what's the life cycle of a big screen thing? But in my universe, I'm dealing with capital equipment that could have anywhere from a 5 to 20-year life cycle. What's the plant going to look like within that 20 years? What's the technology? How many upgrades are going to be involved in your TV screen? So if you can also introduce that you're going to be with there, not only along the buyer's journey, but the end user's journey as well, because that second sale is really all about the end user's journey. Then you're everybody's thinking bigger, and you're going to be a sales archaeologist, and you're creating that big picture, but relating it to the minutia of the decisions. And guess what? The sales engineers can sit and listen to you.
Listen, I mean, look at you. We got sales scientists, sales archaeologists. You be dropping sales paleontologists, sales neurologists. You're gonna be dropping all kinds of stuff on us before you know it. I'll be able to do brain surgery by the time I'm done with you. I mean, this is crazy. Well, everybody, listen. This is The Word, a jolt of sales 411 with Kiki B, and our guest today, Babette Ten Haken. She is the author of Do You Mean Business? And this wonderful ebook called Selling to the Skeptical Decision Makers. She is a genius and has been dropping knowledge for the last 20 minutes on how to sell to the technical buyer and the difference. Now, you talk about there's two places I want to go here next, Babette. And I guess I'll go here to wrap up our last call. So in the Challenger Customer, if you haven't read it, they talk about the skeptical buyer or the skeptic. That's one of the buying types. And they also talk about the skeptic as being one of the key, my mind's escaping. They have two types of the buyers that you want. The motivated buyer, I think the motivator, I think is what it's called, right? And the skeptic is one of those positive labels that they have in that. So is their definition of skeptic the same definition of a skeptic that you're talking about? Do they fall into the same camp?
Let's kind of do these two species, okay, because there are two species here. One is the positively engaged, skeptical, technical decision maker. You know, as a sales, you've succeeded crossing the interface between sales and engineering. You've motivated them. They're asking you killer questions, but you've intrigued them. And you've given yourself permission not to know. You stop yourself if you don't understand what they're talking about. But it's a positive, productive conversation. Then there's the other type, and we've all seen that. Naysayers, skeptical, naysayers will crawl out of the woodwork whenever there's a decision to be made. You know, all of a sudden they show up at the table and you have no idea where they came from. And they're kind of sitting there like this, and whatever you say, they're putting you down. Now, that should be the auga, okay? Because first of all, always anticipate they're going to come out of the woodwork. Their role is, in fact, to stall or derail the sale.
Blockers. So this is what the challenging customer calls blockers. So a skeptic, you have to be able to determine between a true skeptic, who is a motivator.
Right.
Can you do me a favor and make sure I'm getting that right? I think it's called the motivator. And then, or a blocker, who is not going to help you at all. And they're never going to help you. And you got to stay away from them.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, theoretically, you should have done your archaeology and kind of understand a little bit about these. I mean, that's part of discovery process too. Who in your organization typically shows up at these meetings? I mean, ask the question. But the thing is, as well, is that don't argue with these people. You know, if they show up and, you know, it's very obvious that the organization had no intention of making any decision that was their decision, that there are people that function in that role. But just make sure that that individual is, and some examples I've been in, you know, fellow shows up, not a fancy title, sitting at the table, we're getting around to close the deal. Everybody turns to this person who nobody ever said anything about, you know, and he was sitting there like this, and he goes, yep, sounds good. He was the head engineer, you know, he was the last word. So determine what, you know, who the key players are, what the dynamics of the organization are, so you're not necessarily blindsided, but be smart enough. Don't argue with these people, you know, and that's what they're trying to do is just find a reason not to move forward with the sale. Theoretically, if you start doing this correctly, you'll have more of the motivators and less of the what I call the status quo naysayers.
Okay. All right. Good. So, all right. So the other part, I want to shift gears a little here, and you talk about pull selling. What is pull selling?
Where do I talk about? P-O-L-E?
Pull. P-U-L-L. Pull selling. Pull selling aligns better with the buyer's decision-making process. Yes, pull.
Well, and that's really great because I did not understand what Jim was saying, right? So I just asked him to clarify.
Yes.
And that's okay because everybody's got different accents too, and that's another part of miscommunication. Pull selling is this. As a seller, you want to be invited to your customers' tables as a trusted resource, you know, as a highly valued thought leader. You know, there's a lot of this stuff that goes on with social selling and all this other stuff, but the bottom line is I want people calling me, and they do, saying, we've got a merger and acquisition coming up. I don't know if there's a role for you right now, but I'm interested in inviting you in to weigh in on some of this. That's pull selling, P-U-L-L, in the sense that you want the marketplace to call you. A lot of people, you know, a lot of us still are engaged in traditional push selling. We throw, and your company is too, you know, you throw a lot of marketing, communication, advertising, events, a lot of stuff at the marketplace. But there's so much noise out there that as an individual seller that works for a really solid, you know, kick-butt company with a great brand, you have to say to yourself, I need to become an expert in certain areas, and that's going to be my personal brand when I sell. And so that creates a marketplace who pulls you. That creates a great referral network because you help other people. You have tremendous customer success stories. You have a retained customer base, and it opens the door for new business acquisition as well. So pull selling, to me, is very much underutilized, quite honestly. The top sellers use it.
I completely agree with you. It's completely underutilized. So how do I do that, right? So if I'm a salesperson, because I think that is the next level selling. Yeah. How does someone build that brand? How does someone build that expertise you're describing? How do they position themselves? as a pull seller and increase the number of opportunities that they're pulled into?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'll probably piss off all the social selling people that are on this call. You know, polls, you're not the size of your Twitter following, you know, or your LinkedIn following. You know, when you pass away, you know, your tombstone is not going to say, I had umpteen bazillion more followers. However, think about this, context and clarity, okay? Composition, context, quality, cadence. It's not about having a bazillion Twitter followers, but it's having an exquisitely niche-specific set of a network that is in the lane that you drive in. So figure out what it is that you bring to the table time and time again throughout the course of your career that nobody else brings, because that is your core competency, truly. We're all sellers. We're all placed on teams which are pretty homogeneous of people who sold. But the top sellers know who they are. They know the value that they bring to the customer's table, and they're willing to adapt, adopt, and apply that to, you know, different contexts, you know, different types of buying contexts, and that's their brand.
So that's the top sellers, but let's just assume the 80-20 rule. 8 out of every 10 people listening to this right now are not top sellers. How do they get there? What are 2 or 3 specific things that they can do to begin to get closer to that?
Well, let me tell you, I love the middle of that beautiful bell curve. You know, the 60%? Mm-hmm. And right around the middle of the 60%, because a 10% shift in productivity really can impact organizationally, can have a huge impact organizationally, let alone on their bottom line. And stop thinking about yourself as 60%, that middle of the bell curve. You know, you're better than that. Now, part of it is, if you're in that 60%, you may not want to do all the work that's necessary to get to the top 10% or 5% or whatever percent, okay? But think about 2 or 3 things that you're willing to do. And I think part of it is read. Really read about an industry or a specific facet of your company that is intriguing. Talk to your customers about it. Engage them in conversations, because what happens is the next conversation you have with a new customer or even an existing one, you're able to start saying, that's really interesting that you say that to me, because in my other conversations with customers in this particular industry vertical, I'm finding that they're saying this and this, or alternatively, that's exactly what they're finding. Why do you think that's happening? It's just that little shift in conversation. It's not this always be selling. It's always be listening and extrapolating, a little scientific term here, and building your vision bigger. Think bigger than 60%, people, please. You know, think 150%. You know, and because that's the key to innovation. That's news that you're bringing to your customers' organizations that differentiates you from everybody else.
So what I'm hearing, or how I interpret what you just said, is rather than focus on my product or my service, in my company, focus on the application of my product or service. Focus on the environment of which my product or service is applied. Think about the impact of my product or service, one product or service once applied to an organization. So, and then think of the people and those engaged, how they react to the impact of my product or service after it's been applied. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and let's coin another term, become a sales app.
Okay.
To facilitate across the sales engineering interface. I call first dibs. I'll go apply for trademark right now. But the thing is, yeah, I mean, you're this filter for the customer. You're this application. And a lot of times, buyers are so caught up in tunnel vision, they're overwhelmed by all the stuff they're dealing with in their own organization, that they really don't have time to think bigger. And if you can, and I always talk about, it's in the book too, my goal, and my goal today even you know, in the sales jolt is to move people 1 millimeter outside their current level of comfort. If you can do that, chances are you're gonna see their shoulders relax. You know, they're gonna sit back in their chairs. There's gonna be less tension in their voice. There's gonna be that pause going, huh, I never thought about it that way before. That to me is everybody's goal.
So one of the things that I see here, there's a great opportunity, is from a sales leadership perspective, right? So let's go there for a second. In the last few minutes we have here, let's talk about sales leadership. If I am a sales leader listening to this right now, and you've got me sold that I want my people to be able to talk to technical buyers and take control of a technical selling environment, how do I implement that across company-wide? What can I do besides training? Because training, look, training only goes so far. Let's just not bullshit, right? You train, everybody forgets it. So outside of training, what can I do to build a culture? There you go. How do we build a culture of selling technically?
That's a great question, and it's perfect. Because even when I do customer retention strategy, it's a matter of collaboration training. This is not a sales issue. This is not an engineering issue, people. This is a workforce hiring issue, okay? Collaboration pokes holes on corporate silos. It's all hands on deck. I think Deloitte recently published a study in saying the future of work, quite honestly, is a network of collaborative teams. So it's kind of deal with it, people. This is the eventuality of it. Be scientific, and here's how, sales leaders. Beta test, okay? Even when I'm helping people sell capital equipment, they're not going to bring that big sucker into a plant and flip the on switch. It's going to wreak all havoc. But what you do is you can create beta teams based on the hypothesis and some goals that you want to create, and you can create some metrics that don't look like KPIs, thank you very much, and you can start to see who works best in those situations. And let me throw another thing at you, and it could very well be that your 60% people would be so jazzed to work in that kind of environment. You know, so you've got some Cinderellas in there that you aren't taking advantage of, and that may create the right sandbox environment. So when I work with customers on some of these disruptive issues, I mean, let's face it, I think people have moved about 2 millimeters or 3 outside their comfort level in this call. Let's create sandboxes. I mean, and that's, you know, that's just taking a page out of entrepreneurship and startup methodology, and because I work with, you know, startups as well. Create a sandbox. Do your experiments in that. Figure out what works and what doesn't work.
What would a good, so if I'm a sales leader, what would be a good sandbox?
Well, a sandbox, it's interesting, and it goes back to corporate culture and workforce, because a lot of times I think a lot of sales leaders feel like they've got to make an end run around corporate culture. But you're basically going to be doing, you're going to be an entrepreneur. You're going to be doing innovation within your organization. So typically there are key projects or key verticals or key customer sets that you really haven't had much success moving into. Create a sandbox. Sit down and really evaluate what's necessary, not only monetarily, but workforce, human capital strategy, hiring practices as well. What's necessary for you to start to penetrate effectively, consistently, and successfully within those environments, and set yourself up a moderate timeline with some milestones, but go about it like you were a startup.
All right, makes sense. So, quick question. Tim Sanders.
Deal storming.
I'm sorry?
Deal storming.
Deal storming, thank you. Thank you. Have you read it, Babette? And when you talk about selling cross-functionally, is this what you're sort of talking about? This some of the stuff that Tim has talked about, or have you not seen this book yet?
Not seen his book yet.
Okay, Deal storming, check it out. Check it out. I think you'll like it. It dovetails quite well with some of the stuff that you're talking about here. So, all right. Well, listen, everybody. We have been talking with Babette Ten Haken. Why am I echoing all of a sudden?
I'm not sure.
Odd. Okay.
Now it's gone.
No, it's gone. Go figure. So we are talking with Babette Ten Haken, folks, author of Do You Mean Business? We have been talking about trying to connect with the technical buyer and the skeptical buyer, and we all know how difficult they are to sell to. So, Babette, this was fantastic. I really appreciate it. Hey, what do you want to leave our audience with?
You're smarter than you give yourself credit for, and give yourself permission to not know, and then go out and find the answers. Like, I'm going to go buy that book right after Sales Joe.
There you go, Tim Sanders. You got a new book sold. Royalties this way, baby. Tim's a great guy. I love the guy. He's been on the show. He's a fantastic guy. Well, Babette, thank you very, very much on behalf of all our listeners. I really appreciate it. Kiki B, what do we got coming up? Anything we need to talk about? Any house cleaning stuff?
So we may have a special visitor coming in. Kevin Reese had a question on Twitter and asked to be a part, so he might join us or not. But next week, we have another awesome woman coming to join us, and we are going to have Angela Lee Duckworth join us, which was huge. It's actually a story in and of itself getting her on the show, so be sure that you catch that. It's going to be next 2 Thursdays from now, 11 a.m. Eastern, or 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern.
People, if you don't know who Angela Duckworth is, she is the author of Grit, the new best-selling book, Grit, and has done amazing studies on how grit is actually more valuable than your being and your intelligence to achieving success. So this is going to be a killer, killer show.
I'm dropping the link in the showcase right now, so any of our live viewers, feel free to RSVP to that now. And ahead of the time, like I did for this one, there is a survey in there so you can get your grit score before you sign on and know exactly how deeply you have to listen.
How gritty are you? How gritty are you?
Yeah.
Honest. Yes, yes, yes. That is awesome. All right, folks, so 2 weeks from today, we have Angela Duckworth. Anything else, Kiki, we need to share? Any other housekeeping stuff we need to drop before we kick?
So we get lots of comments, questions through Twitter. Just a reminder, if you are listening to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever, we always appreciate your feedback, so drop us a comment. Same with YouTube. The more of a conversation that these sales jolts can be, I think the more beneficial they are for everyone.
Yes, yes. Make a comment right down here, and please on iTunes, please like us. Give us a 1-star, 5-star. I really don't care. I just want the feedback, and tell us what you think, and we can make it better. So unless there's anything else, Kiki, are we good?
I think we are good.
Babette, thank you very much, sister. I really, really appreciate it. It was awesome having you on. And so I guess you got it, sister. You got it. Until next time, peace. I'm out.
So just chill till the next episode.